It's another day in the shop. We're making more progress on the LS swapped 2nd gen Cyclone, and we are getting so close to actually driving this thing for the first time, and I cannot wait for that. Last time you guys saw it, we actually fired up the 5.3 for the very first time. We got our startup tune flashed into the computer. We made sure all the wiring harness was correct. We did a leak check. And so far we're off to a great start. And then since then I got the bumper reinstalled. I got the inner fender liner put back in. And my goal for the day is actually to get everything finished up underneath the hood. Well, everything except the radiator, because that is still being built. But we have a few plumbing odds and ends to finish up. And then I do also want to get the transfer case installed. This is a NV149 full-time all-wheel drive transfer case. I did order a clocking ring for it. And it arrived, but the one that I ordered initially, I don't really like the design of it. So I have another one that I bought, which should be here, I think, tomorrow. So if that shows up in time, we'll get the transfer case installed. Then we can do drive shafts and shifter cable and all that good stuff underneath. But let's just start underneath the hood and get this plumbing wrapped up. All right, we're gonna start out doing some power steering hoses. We build all our own hoses here for pretty much every part of a project. But the one thing different about power steering compared to, say, fuel lines is the amount of pressure that it takes. So you can't use standard AN plumbing for power steering systems. This is basically hydraulic hose. But the good thing is, hose is assembled pretty much the same way. Basically just screw the hose nut on until it kind of bottoms out in there. Just a little assembly oil on here. All right, so this guy goes from the pump to the pressure inlet of the Hydro Boost. And it's gonna come up sort of like here. And because these fittings don't swivel, I always make a mark on the nut and make a corresponding mark on the hose here, so I know roughly where to clock everything to make it line up again. Set a good example. Safety equipment. All right, there's one. You know, I still remember to this day, the first time I built a hydraulic hose assembly. I actually worked for my grandfather for a couple summers when I was like 13, 14, and 15. And we did forestry equipment. So worked on excavators and pulp trucks and skidders and all kinds of stuff like that. So I've built quite a few hydraulic hoses in my day. Actually, one of the big projects I did, I think the summer I was 14, we completely rebuilt. It was a 1969 Timberjack 250, I think. Little skidder, had a 353 Detroit in it. We went through, painted it. I don't think I have any pictures of it, but that was a lot of fun. Yeah, for all these years, my Harbor Freight snippers are letting me down. Can't believe it. Time for some new ones. I got to take apart that first hose we built so I can add some of this. I decided after the fact, but not a big deal. Now, would I say that it's overkill to wrap all the lines in this silicone hose stuff? Yeah, definitely. But that's why we do it. Some of that special tape. I'll wrap the last little bit to cover up all the blue. All right, so pressure in, pressure out to box. Now we need to do low pressure return. And that is going to be accomplished with regular hose. I ended up buying two of these different kits that have these, I think they're called Oetker clamps in them. And they always have these random sizes, but between the two kits, I think I have just about everything that I need. Now I gotta say that this phase of the project that we're in right now has gotta be like the worst for me. And it's also the most difficult part of the project to maintain motivation on. Turn the radio down. Just because it's like there's so many little things to do, and individually none of them are very hard or difficult, but it just seems like there's so many little things, and it's like building brackets here and there to tidy up wire routing and stuff like that, where it just sucks up a bunch of time. But my whole theory and thought process is do it once, do it right, because there's nothing I can stand less than getting a project finished up, but not really finished, where you have to go back and redo a bunch of stuff. I like to get everything done, and that way I can drive it and not have to worry about a single thing. So that's kind of my thought process, but it is definitely a drag. When we're almost at the finish line, we just want to drive it, but we're not there quite yet. So quick status update of where we at. We have all the power steering lines built. We got them running from the pump up to the Hydro Boost, out from the Hydro Boost down to the box. We have a return line, and then we have our coolers still plumbed in place. We got our little Y fitting running up into the reservoir. So power steering is 100% done. Also, I did install, you notice that little silver bracket down there. That's the bracket for the cooling fan harness. This is also from Current Performance, same people that built the engine harness, so that'll plug right in. They have a nice little disconnect there, and then we just gotta hit battery power, and then we'll attach the fan connectors to the fans whenever they show up. Let's see, a few other odds and ends. I got the throttle cable bracket redesigned. This was just a cheap Amazon Trailblazer SS intake. The spacing wasn't quite right, so I redid that. Also changed the throttle cable itself from the 4.3 V6 to a 5.3 Silverado cable from, say, like an 01 or an 02. It has a little bit shorter sheath on the cable, so it routes a little bit cleaner. Looks kind of neat in factory or whatever. I guess that's my whole goal for everything that we're doing here, is just try to make it look as if the factory kind of sort of did it. And I think we're getting there. So now I'm just gonna move on to the battery cables. When I did the test fire last time, we just reconnected the original V6 battery cables, but they're a thin gauge, and they also have these awful like DIY replacements, which is not gonna fly. So we'll get the proper battery cable size installed. We'll add a alternator charge cable. Then we got to do a little bit more bracketry down below because we've got a few things like this power feed that goes over to the junction box that needs to have a home because it used to attach to a fan shroud that's no longer going to be there. So anyway, let's continue on. Oh, and real quick, I also wanted to give a quick shout out to Brian. He is a viewer who has sent this in. It came from Amazon, had his name on it. So thank you, Brian. This is a nifty funnel that has a little threaded tip, I guess you would call it. So he must have saw me adding oil to this in the last episode, but now all we gotta do is undo the cap, screw this guy directly into the valve cover. That way we won't have any leaks. So awesome product. Thank you, Brian, for sending that in. All right, so I did go out and buy all new battery cables so we could build these from scratch, but instead I decided I'm just gonna repurpose the original battery cables that came with the donor truck from an 03 Silverado. And the reason I'm going to do that is just because the cable's a lot thicker than what's in the truck right now. And mainly, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I haven't been able to find this kind of factory end for the starter. So this cable's like a mile too long, but all I'm going to do is, you know, pull it out of the harness, cut what I need, and I'll recrimp an end on the battery side, and then it'll be good. I figure if it'll start a 5.3 in a Silverado, it'll start a 5.3 in an S10, or a boat, or a plane, or a train. So really that's all we need, except we're going to save all this because we are going to put it in the drag truck someday. So if you can see that, just pulled the starter cable off there, pull the ground cable off there. All right, so we are upgrading everything while we're in here. Grounds are especially important on electrical stuff just to make sure it all runs properly. This, for example, this was the old wire that would ground from the battery to the frame. It's probably like a, I don't know, an 8 or a 10 gauge. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but bigger is always better. So this wire here, this is actually the old engine block to battery ground, and now we are moving that down to the frame ground, and this guy will be the new battery to engine ground. So everything is like stepping up in size just to make all the electrical connections that much better. So it was a little bit shorter of a work week for us here, Thanksgiving week, and we only do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday here at the shop. Technically it's Friday for me here. I came in just to get a few odds and ends finished up, but we actually did manage to get most everything done that we set out to accomplish. You can probably see the transfer case behind me there on the table. The adapter is not here, or the clocking ring is not here yet. I think it'll be here late tonight, but I got to go home and do some editing, so I won't be able to get the transfer case in. But other than that, pretty much everything under the hood more or less is done, or at least I should say everything that we have here. The radiator's still the obvious big missing piece, and then once that does arrive, I can do the last few things like terminate the cooling fan harness, and then once the radiator's in, I can build the air intake tube around it, and then we'll have a place to plug the mass airflow sensor in. But what we did accomplish, we have all the battery cables done. I always leave it disconnected, obviously. Battery cables are all done to the starter, to the alternator. All the grounds are done to the chassis, to the frame, to the engine, to the everything. Throttle cables in, power steering hoses are built. And we got a few more items checked off of our list, and that's honestly my favorite part of finishing up a build, is just crossing the item off. In fact, I'll actually write an item down that I've already finished and crossed it off just so I have that satisfaction. I'm weird. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. We're getting in the home stretch. I mean, really all we have left to do, throw a radiator in, throw the transfer case in, throw the drive shafts in, build an exhaust, and then we are gonna drive the wheels off of this thing like it was intended to be driven. So thank you guys. Come back soon.